be there. Okay, honey. We have some people who are new here this morning. You'll be meeting them, I hope. And as the morning goes on, I'm Judy. That's Bob, and we've known each other for a couple of years now. And so we also like to tell you little quick stories here and there. But there's so many speakers this morning. I think we'll probably just get going with all of you. And if we have a little time at the end, maybe the two of us will have a... Okay.
Okay, our first speaker is someone who's spoken before, but several years ago. And we're going to welcome Sharon McGuire.
All right, Sharon.
Good morning, friends and neighbors. I wanted to share 3 brief pieces with you this morning. 2 are pieces that I wrote for an anthology that's being published. I submitted it, and hopefully I will get into the book. And the third one is a story about my mother. The first one is called, again, this is a grief anthology. So the piece is called A Bright Light Extinguished, A Mother's Grief. What do I tell myself about my grief now? That I feel it, that it is very real, that it hurts deeply, that I want the world to just stop and listen and feel just for a moment. Put yourself in my shoes for a moment. See me, the wholeness of me, the day I cannot change or undo. Just hug me, listen to me, hear me. Another Mother's Day screams at me and I want it to go away. I am still a mother and always will be. I want to remember him, talk about him. I long to hold my child again, to see his smile, to hear his voice, to watch him grow. Don't erase him. Don't take his memory from me. It's all I have left. Please sit with me. Listen to how happy and bright he was. He lived, he laughed, he was funny, he was kind, he was intelligent. I grieve still, alone.
Oh, sure.
And the second piece on this is called No Time to Prepare or Say Goodbye. There was no time to prepare, no time to say goodbye. My 7-year-old said, I love you, Mommy, as he smiled his bright, happy smile at me. Our eyes met as we held each other's gaze. I love you too, I told him. That final moment of love, mother and child. He raced out the door to play Star Wars with his friend. I heard the sirens moments later and my heart stopped as I held my breath. Something grabbed me and held me steady. My dance teacher looked at me, stunned. The superintendent came to the door looking for me and made me follow him. Outside, I yelled for my son. I ran into the busy street to the waiting police officer who would drive me behind the ambulance to the emergency room. Why was he near the street, I asked. I told him never to go near the street. The officer said gently, you know how kids are. They get to playing and forget. The days, weeks, months that followed were a blur. I was in shock and numb inside. The grief has never left. I longed to hold my child again, to see him smile, hear his voice, his laughter, watch him grow. I carry on one day at a time, remember him, loving him, missing him. I've had many other losses since that day of family members, friends, pets, jobs, my family home, finances, marriage, lovers, relationships, but nothing compares to the loss of my child. Grief lingers and can erupt anew with a memory or a movie or a photo. Anything can spark it when I least expect it. It's like a punch to my gut, and I weep for those losses. We miss who we've lost in this lifetime. It's an ugly part of life to lose a loved one. We can never prepare for it. It never goes away completely. There are times when I want to rage at the unfairness of life. I ask, why him? Why him? Why us? Take the evil people and leave the good. But no, it is not our choice who goes and who stays. In my mind, I still see my son's bright smile at the door that final day. I love you, Mommy, was my gift. The ache in my heart and gut is ever present. I carry on as best I can, alone in my grief and memories. I am a mother, and always will be. The third piece is a little story about my mother. Her last 3 years she spent in Greenwich Woods Nursing Home on the dementia unit. And they brought in a robotic seal named Paro. Now Paro looks like a baby harp seal. And he's got this big round face and these big eyes and these long eyelashes. And he coos and he goes, and he talks to people. He is designed, I guess in Japan, they're far ahead of us, I guess. He was designed to recognize faces and respond to touch. He remembers voices. It's just an incredible thing. I saw my mother's video. It's just incredibly touching to watch. But she bonded with Paro in the way he was designed for. They built a real, honest relationship with each other. And Paro was as close to being human as a robot can be. And the video I saw when she first met him, she says, "Oh, look at this, how cute he is." And she started to coo to him and sing to him. And he looked up at her, he's whimpering and making his noise. He turns his head, he rolls over, he's really sweet. And she says, "Oh, don't cry, I will take care of you, sweetheart." And he whimpers at her. And the thing that struck me when he was passed to the next resident in the room, my mother said something from the other side, and he turned to look for her because he remembered her voice and her face, and he whimpered for her. So it's just an incredible thing, and what I like is because she built this relationship with this robot as he was designed for, they filmed her, and her video is being used worldwide in training videos to teach people how to use Paro. So I just think that's there's a picture of her. I can pass it around for everybody to see. Picture with her, with Paro, and I was touched. I was absolutely touched that they took her, and she doesn't know it because she was in the throes of dementia. She had no clue. But my mom is out there, and she is teaching people how to work with a robot. So I just wanted to share that. I thought that was fun. Thank you for your time.
Put the picture on the table here, and people can look at it.
Or you could pass it around.
Then remember to take it with you. What a wonderful sharing of your experiences with us. The next speaker was recruited by my wife in the swimming pool. And he and his wife are relatively new to the Heritage Village. And I'm going to welcome Andy Osowski.
All right, Andy.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I got my timing started. Okay, Judy, thank you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
So glad to have you here.
Yeah, so I'm surprised, I'm the new one and I'm on the top of the list already. Well, the story is that, I don't know how funny is that, but I broke my arm when I was, much younger, and I'm laying in a Yale University in the hospital, and a lot of doctors come over and nurses and checking, walking.
Excuse me, Andy, a little more to the
Okay,
mic.
right.
There you go.
So there's all people, nurses and doctors coming back and forth, checking me and in and out. And between them, one little kid walking. So when he left, I asked nurse, "Who is this kid?" And she said, "Oh, that's going to be your surgeon." And I think to myself, what? He looks like he just left the college. And so I told my wife, she checked this guy later on the internet, and he was pretty good, actually, And the nurse told me later, "I'm telling you something, don't tell nobody. If he can't do it, nobody in this hospital will." I say, all right, let's do it. And he comes over and he explained what's the procedure going to be about it. Actually, it was pretty complicated because this hand go other way, other side. It's almost like fitted. Hanging kind of skin. So that was like almost impossible to repair it. But this guy, precisely explained me what he's gonna do and how he's gonna do. He doesn't warranty at the end what's gonna happen, but he warranted that he's gonna put all his heart to do it. So, and he said that, sign the paper if I agree. I call this, because the tenants, he said, they're so ripped off. He's not sure if he's gonna be attach them together. So if I'm okay with, I call this, use the dead people, the tenants, because they have it on the side. And I say, sure, no problem. And afterwards, let's say, look at this years back, perfect, This guy was a genius, okay? And years back, I have a rotating cuff problem. So I said to my wife, you know what? I wish to find this guy who did this hand. He seems like it's a genius to me. So I start looking on internet, I can't find him. So where he can be? So I start digging farther and farther. Finally I find him. He's in a Greenwich hospital. So I called them and they told me he doesn't take any new patient. So I told him I'm not new. So they start digging. She said, I went back 10 years. I don't see your name. So I say, digging deeper. And she, oh yeah, I got your name. I said, see, that's good. So to make the story short, I meet him and he remembered me. Because he was young and he said 4 hours operation. He put everything, these pieces like a puzzle. And he was a genius from the young kid. And so I told him that I want you doing this operation. And he said, okay. So what, after MRI and all these x-rays, he said, well, you put a really good candidate for the shoulder replacement. And I said, plastics in my arm? No. And he said, well, I don't know if I can fix it. This is all tendons here, you got it ripped off, everything. And I said, well, I read on internet, you got it something like reverse, the shoulder replacement, the rotating cuff, reverse. He said, yes, but that's not too often successful because this is very, very hard. Instead of pulling from here, they have to go there on the back and bringing everything here. And finally, after discussion, I was stubborn. I said, I don't want any plastic. So he said, okay, I'm going to do it. So the operation again was like over 3 hours later, I find out. And I don't know, I'm all this wrapped around, so I don't know how this happened, what happened. So over the time, I started going to the therapy for 5 months, and it was better and better and better. So I visited him like 3, maybe 4 times in between. Very nice guy, very funny guy, which was like completely on the loose. And he told me, you know what, I told you something. When you told me that you don't want a replacement, you just want a, reverse rotating cuff, I thought you crazy. But you know what? I'm more crazy because I agreed to do that. That's exactly what he said. And so I'm supposed to see him only when I have a problem. So far I don't. So it's fun. I just want to read something. I found out this yesterday on internet because this guy is something else. So I just want to read you the couple words what I find out. Okay, his name is Osowski. Okay, Powell finished the sport medicine fellowship after the prestigious Carol and Joe Orthopedic Institute in Los Angeles. That's besides every college probably he had. That was the addition. Then that was in the institute in Los Angeles, California, where he was the assistant team physician for Los Angeles Lakers baseball team, Los Angeles Kings hockey team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, University of Southern California football team. So if he is this kind of guy, I figure he can work on me.
Yes.
Just be careful walking back down the aisle.
I know
Okay, our next speaker is often up here in the microphone. We'll welcome Michael Volin.
I'm not going to talk about such a serious subject, but this subject was of interest to me because I'm a boxing fan, so I'm talking about a professional boxer of about 40 years ago, Jose Torres. And the reason it was of interest to me is that years ago, maybe about 15 years ago, I was reading in the Ring magazine one of their articles, and this one really struck me because it was about fighters' feelings and emotions. It wasn't about their skills or about boxing. I'm talking about boxing, not mixed martial arts. And I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago when there were only 8 divisions, not about 28. And four sanctioning bodies, so there's 4 champions for every division. They were just eight divisions with 8 champions. So when a man was fighting for the title, it was a major thing. It wasn't just a promotion. Anyway, the article was about what a good fighter feels when he's knocked down. Now, normally when a fighter is knocked down, it's very dangerous for him. He could be seriously hurt. And even if he gets up, he's got to face his opponent again without being in good coordination. He's got to be very careful, and probably his opponent is going to throw punch after punch after him. He's in trouble. But the gist of the article was the feeling that many fighters have when they're knocked down is embarrassment. They're very ashamed. And their instinct is to react to the shame and bounce right up and show the fans and his opponent and the referees and the judges that he's not really hurt. But that's really the wrong way to react to a knockdown. A real professional knows he has 10 seconds to rest, and it's his time. So he stays down and gives his mind a chance to clear and his muscles a chance to get their coordination as much as possible, and he gets up at the count of 9, the last possible second. So the second part of the article was about Jose Torres. He was a great Puerto Rican middleweight and later on a light heavyweight champion. And Torres told a story. He was a good storyteller. He was an unusual fighter because he had brains. When he was starting out his career as a middleweight, he was friends with the journalist Pete Hamill, and Pete Hamill worked on his writing. So while Torres was fighting, he was also writing an article, columnist, and writing in Spanish for El Diario magazine. And later on, when he retired, he wrote books in English. He was a good writer. He became a pillar of the Puerto Rican community. Later on, he was given the opportunity, instead of a political appointment, the governor of New York appointed him head of the State Athletic Commission. So he was responsible for the boxers, and he did many good things for boxers. He left the position better than he found it for the benefit of boxers. Well, anyway, before I start the story, the last few things about Torres is that he was a fighter whose trainer and manager was Customato. Customato was one of the great trainers of boxing. He trained Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres and later on Mike Tyson. When Mike Tyson, beginning his career, he was a very capable boxer. So anyone who was trained by Customato knew his business. D'Amato trained a fighter so he would fight in the style where his best attributes were put into play and his faults were hidden. He did so when a man fought, his best fighters were really, really good. And I read on the computer Torres' career. He had a 70-bout career, and he only lost a few times, and he fought the best men possible. When he was champion in light heavyweights, he fought the best contenders. So he was a fighter with integrity. And when he retired, when he was a fighter, a lot of Puerto Ricans moved to New York, and they had a rough time. And he and Carlos Ortiz were heroes to these Puerto Ricans. He gave them a lot of joy and pleasure because he was a fighter of integrity and skill. Now, the gist of the article was that when Torres became champion, he fought for a couple of years the best possible contenders. He didn't avoid good fighters, and he fought in their bailiwick, meaning he wasn't afraid of a poor referee. And finally, after 2.5, 3 years, he fought the best around, who was a Nigerian fighter, Dick Tiger. Tiger was a great man in his own, a Nigerian hero, and he lost the championship to Tiger. Now Torres was 32 years old, still in his prime, and he wanted a rematch. And Tiger was the kind of fighter who would give him a rematch, but first he had to have a victory on his credit before he was given a second title chance. So I wasn't following boxing at the time, so I don't know the name of the person, but he was given a main event at Madison Square Garden, fighting the 5th or 6th contender. The man he was fighting was a skilled boxer, not a very hard hitter, but a good puncher and very good on defense. So Torres trained for a boxing match. He didn't feel he'd have to be worried about being hurt. He just had to be worried about outboxing his opponent, and he was well capable of it. Well, the day before the fight, the Madison Square Garden, oh yes, there was an advance sale of 11,000 people because the Puerto Ricans again were going to show up to see Torres fight and to root for him. So the day before the fight, the Garden called Boston for this opponent, and the managers told the Garden that the opponent was sick. He had a respiratory illness. So it so happens at boxing matches that sometimes a fighter gets hurt in training. He hurts his leg, or he hurts a fist, or he gets an eye cut, and main events are canceled sometimes, but they're not canceled for things like respiratory illness. So the Garden warned this manager to stay in bed, take chicken soup, rest the rest of the day, and rest the next day up to the afternoon, and be there at the Garden for the main event. So they said they'd do the best they could. On the day of the fight, they got a call from Boston that the man wasn't coming. So now Madison Square Garden was left with no one to fight Jose Torres. So they were desperate. They called fighters, any fighter that they could, but it was almost impossible to get a man in the last few hours to participate in this fight. So it looked like they'd have to cancel the main event, and all those Puerto Rican people who spent more money they can afford to come would either get their money back or be very, very angry and upset for wasting their money. So Torres showed up in the dressing room for the fight, and the Garden put off telling him what the situation was until the last minute. At 8 o'clock, the Garden matchmaker started walking around the ring because the preliminary fight started. And sitting at ringside, he saw a light heavyweight, Charlie Green. Charlie Green was kind of a fighter who never made the high ratings, but he was a terribly hard puncher. Nobody really wanted to fight him, but in every important fight of his career he lost because he wasn't skilled in boxing. He was just a terribly, terribly hard puncher. So Stefano went up to Charlie Green, who was sitting there eating a hot dog and having a glass of soda. He said, Torres' opponent didn't show up. Are you willing to fight the main event? So this is an opportunity of a lifetime. This is a man whose career was on the skids. He was getting older. Now he has a chance to fight for a man who's the best in, practically the best in the division. So he said he would take on the fight. So they wanted him for a cheap price, but he didn't accept a cheap price. He wanted $5,000 or $6,000. They had to give it to him. So they said, go to your dressing room, we'll call your manager, and now we have to ask Torres if he's willing to fight you. So they went to Torres, and they told him that you can fight Charlie Green or we'll have to cancel the main event. Now, it wasn't in Torres' interest to fight Charlie Green because he had trained to fight a boxer, not a hard puncher. But for two reasons. If he did the Garden a favor and fought for this fight, they might give him a return match with Dick Tiger because they'd owe him something. That's one thing. And the second thing was that all the Puerto Ricans were coming to the fight and he didn't want to let them down. So Torres agreed to fight Charlie Green. So at 10 o'clock, the main event was Jose Torres against Charlie Green. So what happened, this fight was not, I couldn't see it, so I'm just telling you what happened from what I could piece together. In the middle of the first round, Torres must have been careless. Green landed one of his haymakers and Torres went down like a sack of potatoes. In other words, he just collapsed in the ring. And he just laid down like this for a few seconds until his head could clear. At the count of four,
Please finish it up.
at the count of four, he rested for about 5 more seconds and he pushed himself up at the count of 9. But it was a minute left. And it was a very dangerous minute for him. So he used every resource that he could to avoid the punches that kept coming him hand over fist. But finally, about 15 seconds, 20 seconds left in the round, he was knocked down again. So again, he did the same thing. He rested, he used his time wisely. He got up and he lasted out the round. His hand was dragged him to the corner. And in the minute rest he was in very, very good shape and he had amazing powers of recuperation. When the next round started, he was a fighter with a mission. And his mission was to take out his opponent as fast as possible. And he had the skill. And by the end of the second round, he had won by knockout. So now he had 5 minutes left till they made the announcement in the ring. And what the story goes is in those 5 minutes, he made up his mind to retire. He didn't make an announcement. He gave himself a week to figure things out and make sure he was doing the right thing. So the reason he retired, the reason in the article that he retired was 2 things. And it was mostly embarrassment. The first thing he thought was, here I am, a 32-year-old man. Intelligent man. I have a wife and children. I have a career ahead of me. What am I doing walking in front of 12,000 people dressed in shorts and sneakers? What kind of an idiot am I to do such a thing? The second thing he thought was that he was on the ground. He was badly hurt. And there were even his fans, 12,000 people roaring with excitement. And he was in trouble. He could have been hurt. But he said to himself, why do I want to be in a position where people are cheering when I'm having my head knocked off? So he made up his mind to retire in the 5 minutes between the knockdown and the announcement of the knockdown, and he kept his word and he retired. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker was a waitress in a theater guild production a little while ago and is going to be a waitress in the next theater production. Patty Churko. We need a box.
I know, yeah, right. I'd probably fall off that. But anyways, I'm gonna be moving around, so I don't need this thing. I am known for my loud voice. The name of my presentation is Grandma is All In. I have 2 grandchildren, and I am their playmate. Especially nowadays, kids don't get together too often, so I'm just another friend. And in our playing, imagination is wild. So I'll just give a little example. My granddaughter at the time was about 6, and she wanted to know if I would play outside, and the game was, we're going to school. Okay. So she takes her bike out of the garage, and she gets on it, and she puts on her little helmet, and I'm like, okay. I said, well, I gotta get my bike. So I go in the garage, and I come out with my fake bike, and I get on it next to her. Okay, and she's waiting, and I let her take the lead, but she's not going anywhere. And I look at her, and I said, are we gonna get going? She looks at me and she says, as soon as you put your helmet on. And this is how we play. Another quick example before I get to this actual story is, running through the house. The play room is up over the garage, and we're in full uniform costume, and we're running through, and my grandson's leading the way, and we run through the back hallway, and I notice my son reading in there, and he looks at me, and as we're going up the steps, he says, Milo, will you tell your friend not to run up the steps? She might fall and get hurt. He goes, okay, Dad. So now at my house, one of their favorite games is they take my spare bedroom, which is their room, and they turn it into a pet shop. We have every animal you could imagine. So one day, I'm noticing my grandson, and I'm right in there. I got to bring the 2 daughters I have, which are dolls that stand about this high, and they're called wispy walkers. You can get them at a lot of drugstores, and they actually will walk. You pull, hold your hand, they'll walk. And I'll go in the pet store, blah, blah, blah. So one day, my grandson, I noticed he hangs a sign in my hallway. Sign. There's the sign. Oh. Sign in my hallway. Missing, call a number, lost, and a very odd looking creature here, which I didn't even know how it got there, but it's a little sticker I guess I had on a pad. So, for you to see a little better, our missing animal, I have a picture up here. Here he is. As you can see, he is a particular looking dog. So, about a week later they come over, and I didn't take down the sign. I always feel guilty to unassemble the things they do. But I'm a little particular about my house, and every time I turn a corner, I see the sign. I said to my grandson and granddaughter, can I take that sign down? And my granddaughter goes, Grandma, no, the dog has not been found. How can you take the sign down? No one's going to know he's missing if you take the sign down. I said, okay, sign stays. So now Grandma says, got the sign coming down. So I set out to find this dog. As you can tell by our picture, not going to be easy. So I start at Hallmark, and I look at the stuffed animals, and nothing's matching, all different colors, but not that. So I go to Target and Walmart and even Goodwill. So now another day I'm at Super Stop and Shop, and something in my mind is saying, go back to Hallmark. I go into Hallmark, my dog is there. Same color. Then from there, I go to Michael's. Michael's, googly eyes. Yes. From there, I go home, and I already know in my mind that I have a certain sponge that will make that tongue. And I do it, and then I put this packing tape over it, which is beige, and then I take out my markers, and I find just the right color for the tongue. grandchildren coming over. Ha ha ha! Grandma's ready. So, in the hallway, I put my sign. Found. And here he is. Now I don't even say a word. I wait for them to come around the corner, and my Rosie's first. Milo, Milo, come, come, our dog has been found. So Milo is 9, and he looks at me. She's already, it's my dog. She takes him down, and Milo looks at me and says, you've outdone yourself this time. And then I said, can I take the sign down now?
Now, was the dog's name Buster?
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.
Now, next speaker is fresh from the stage of Golden. We'll welcome Sandie Tarbox.
Good morning, everyone. I was sorry to not see Carol here today. And the reason is, if anyone has seen any of Carol's postings, she's been having a couple of bad days. So this is for Carol. Think of these folks when you're having a bad day. Fire authorities in California found a corpse in a burned out section of the forest while assessing the damage done by the forest fire. The deceased male was dressed in a full wetsuit, complete with scuba tank on his back, flippers, and a mask. The post-mortem test revealed that the male died not from burns, but from massive internal injuries. Dental records provide a positive identification. Investigators then set about to determine how a fully clothed diver ended up in the middle of a forest fire. It was revealed that on the day of the fire, the man went diving off the coast, some 20 miles from the forest. The firefighter, seeking to control the fire as quickly as possible, had called in a fleet of helicopters with very large dip buckets. Water was dipped from the ocean and emptied at the site of the forest fire. You guessed it, 1 minute our diver was breaststroking and doing flippers in the Pacific, and the next thing he was 300 feet in the air, and some days it doesn't pay to get out of bed. Okay, I will skip this one because I know time is getting on it. Okay.
No.
No, you sure? Sure? Okay. A man was working on his motorcycle, and he was on the patio. His wife nearby in the kitchen. While racing the engine, the motorcycle accidentally took off, and he went right through the patio door. His wife, hearing the crash, ran into the room to find her husband cut and bleeding, and the motorcycle had shattered the patio door. She called for an ambulance, and because the house sat on a fairly large hill, she went down several flights of stairs to meet the paramedics and escort them to her husband. While the attendants were loading the husband, the wife managed to right the motorcycle and push it outside. She also quickly blotted up the spilled gasoline and some paper towels and tossed them into the toilet. After being treated, the man was released and returned home. Looking at the shattered patio door and the damage done to the motorcycle, he went to the bathroom so that he could attend to his business and think about what had happened. About to stand, he flipped the butt between his legs. The wife was in the kitchen and heard a loud explosion and her husband screaming, finding that he'd been lying in the bathroom floor with his trousers blown away. And burns on his buttocks, legs, and groin. She once again calls the ambulance, and the same paramedic crew was dispatched. The paramedics carry the man down the stairs to the ambulance, and the paramedics say, "How did this happen?" And she told them, They started laughing so hard, one slipped on the stairs, the stretcher dumped the husband out, and he fell down the remaining stairs and broke his arm. Are you still having a bad day? Just remember, it could be worse. The average cost of rehabilitating a seal after the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska was $80,000. At the special ceremony, 2 of the most expensive saved animals were being released back into the wild amid cheers and applause of the onlookers. A minute later, in full view of everyone, a killer whale ate them both. Are you still having a bad day? A woman came home to find her husband in the kitchen, shaking frantically, almost with some wire coming out of his ears plugged into the wall. And she picked up the plank of wood and whacked him to stop him from the shaking because she thought he was being electrocuted and broke his arm. But up to that moment, he had been having a very good time and happily listening to his Walkman. Still, you're having a bad day. 2 animal rights protesters were protesting at the cruelty of sending pigs to slaughter in Bonn, Germany. Suddenly, all 2,000 pigs broke loose and stampeded madly, and the 2 helpless protesters were trampled to death. What? You're still having a bad day? Iran terrorist Karan Radjicic didn't pay enough postage on his litter bomb. It came back with return to sender stamp on it. He forgot it was a litter bomb. He opened it and he blew himself to bits. There now, feeling better? So take a deep breath and focus on the happiness. Things could be worse.
Okay.
I've got one more you can add to your collection.
All right, well, our next speaker is the one who used to be in charge of monologues and decided to sort of retire, but he still does a lot of things, writing essays, and Vic Walton will come up with
Well, I have some poetry for you today by Anthony Ewer, and I have also a song to sing to you. Oh, thank you. This is by Anthony Ewer, and it's from his book called The Face. As a beauty, I'm not a great star. There are others more handsome by far. But my face, I don't mind it, because I am behind it. It's the people out front that I jar. With the conscience, we're able to see just how bad we're permitted to be. At the same time, it's true that what's wicked for you may be half not so wicked for me. I love that. This is like Marvin Shapiro. Now, before those guys was me. Before me was Charlie Rippel, and before Charlie was Marvin Shapiro, who used to be host at Monologues. In my youth, I, like Marvin Shapiro, was a Boy Scout. I recall the many campouts that we had. Among my favorite recollections are the evening campfires, when we would gather around the glowing campfire and raise our voices in song. Although we always ended with taps, there were always plenty of whimsical songs that we sang just for the fun of it. One in particular was a song that was filled with lessons of accomplishment and pride. It was entitled Gladys. She is not to be forgotten. She was an American icon, as it turns out. Although the author is literally is a lilting, although the author is this lilting melody, was unknown who wrote it. The message was memorable. It went something like this. Oh, they grow things mighty big down in Kentucky, but there's nothing in that state can quite compare with the cow that we once had us, and the name of her was Gladys. Oh, you should have seen their neighbors stand and stare. She stood 10 foot tall and had one purple eyeball. She held, and the cow that we once, and the cow, well, let's try this again. She stood 10 foot tall and had one purple eyeball. It took 8 of us to milk her, and here's why. She had 27 spigots, and the tourists all bought tickets just to watch us now and hear us loudly cry. Oh, pass the other rudder over to my other brother. Pass the other rudder this away. So we passed the other rudder over to my other brother. Oh, we really had our hands full every day. Father turned her on her back one Sunday morning. Gladys said, I'm upside down, now what's the gag? Well, the reason why, said Pop, is so the cream will be on top. Gosh, the cow said, in that case, it's in the bag. Oh, pass the other rudder over to my other brother. Pass the other rudder this away. Oh, we passed the other rudder over to my other brother. We really had our hands full every day. Now, Gladys said to us one cold and wintry morning, she said, milking is a thing I dearly love. But when I get cold, a cold it lingers, and I can't stand ice or fingers. Please go in the house and please get your gloves. Oh, Gladys was a star of cattle circles, though she couldn't read or write her name in full. Why, you'd think she'd been to college, although she herself acknowledged that she gained her fame entirely by duel. Oh, pass the other rudder over to my other brother. Pass the other rudder this away. So we passed the other rudder over to my other brother. And we really had our hands full every day. I shall never forget the important lessons, the adventures, and the funs, and the many friends I made in Boy Scouts.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Vic. And he mentioned Charlie Rippel, and prior to Vic, Charlie Rippel was in charge. Charlie, come on up and give us a story.
We have a lot to live up to. Between Vic and Charlie.
Good morning. And before I had 11 years of monologue liaison, Marion Levinson, she set up some of the original foundation of monologues. Marion Levinson, wonderful woman. Having a bad day, I was just reminded of something. I heard something on radio, the old-fashioned radio, and it was on a comedy, and it was a true story. It happened in New Jersey. I'm not I'll get into something completely different later. Husband and wife are enjoying the pleasures of marital bliss, completely naked in bed, and the husband hears the water running in the kitchen. He gets up to see what's the matter, and he gets into the kitchen area, opens the cabinets, lays on his back, and wriggles in to see what the problem is. And while he's doing this, the household cat begins to investigate and finds a new toy underneath the kitchen and starts playing. And the husband is startled and in pain, and Suddenly, underneath the kitchen sink, he rises quickly, hits his temple, and knocks himself out. The wife, alerted to this, calls the emergency, and the emergency comes with rescue, and they put him on it. He's completely knocked out. They put him on a gurney, they're carrying him down a flight of stairs, and she's explaining to the medics what happened, and they start laughing, and they lose control. They drop him, and they break something in his body. That was supposed to be a true story. Completely different topic this morning. Strangely enough, it's about submarines. A lot of people don't realize that the first submarine was invented and tried right here in Long Island Sound, down around Milford, Connecticut, by David Bushnell during the Revolution. In fact, he was so successful that a crewman that he trained went to Lower New York Harbor and blew up one of the man-of-wars of the British fleet. There were over 200 ships that were in Lower New York Harbor, and they had a torpedo from the submarine. The name of the first submarine was the Turtle, and there's a long history about the submarines. I can get into that if we had the time. In fact, the First World War, one of the deciding factors of America fighting the war was the sinking of the Lusitania by a German submarine. And then it was the Hunley in the Civil War. I've given talks on the Hunley. Amazing. Hand-propelled, 9 men in a tube going like this. And they had candles to measure the amount of oxygen that they have. If the candle went out, they were finished. The Hunley was discovered about 30 years ago. In fact, that's a museum down in Charleston with the Hunley remnants there. I'd like to speak to you about the submarine of the Kriegsmarine. That was the German naval force. The U-505 entered into history because it became the only surface ship, the only ship that was ever caught on the high seas and captured by an American ship, and I'll tell you that story. The day was June 4th, 1944, 2 days before the D-Day that we commemorate as the invasion, the Great Crusade. I remember that well too, when the announcement was made in the auditorium where I was going in PS 46 in the Bronx. The kids had relatives that were in service. They became hysterical. They stood on the chairs and they were screaming and crying because the invasion of Europe had begun, mercifully, and then the war ended a couple of years later. In any event, the submarine threat in the Pacific too, the Americans against the Japanese, but in the Atlantic was a dire situation. Winston Churchill, in his memoirs, 5 big volumes, said he was never more terrified and sleepless at night of anything that happened to Great Britain during the Second World War. It wasn't Dunkirk, and it wasn't the fighter against Rommel. It wasn't the V-2s, the rockets, the bombs and everything. It was running out of materials. It came 2 weeks within running out of food, medicine, arms, equipment. Starvation faced England in the greater years of the Second World War. Germany dominated the Atlantic, the North Atlantic, for 3.5 years. The Kriegsmarine, the German submarines, they started out before the war, 1938-39, with only 27 submarines. Karl Dönitz was the admiral in charge, and he begged Hitler, have more men, have more submarines. We can starve England, which they nearly did, out of business. But Hitler had another goal, that was defeating Russia, communist Russia. So when he invaded Russia, the Kriegsmarine stepped on his side. Eventually, during the course of the war, Germany had 800 submarines. Wow. Each one of them had 20 torpedoes. They were ordered not to come back to port until they had expended all of their torpedoes, especially on the French coast when they took France in 1 month or less. Saint-Nazaire and Lorient, and they were impossible pens for the submarines to be destroyed. So this was the happy days. They were sinking ships in the Atlantic, Allied ships, faster than we could build them. Things changed around. Sonar was developed. and long-range aircraft. They had the Americans developed flying boats that could land in the middle of the Atlantic and be refueled and then stay on target and then search for the submarines. In June 4th, 1944, the aircraft carrier, American aircraft carrier, the Guadalcanal, which was a Jeep carrier. Jeep carriers were half the size of their full-size carriers. They only were 500 feet long instead of 1,000. They only had 2,000 men instead of 5,000. They only had 50 planes, aircraft, rather than up to 100 on the full carriers like the Essex and the Enterprise and the Lexington, Concorde, and others. They're on patrol off the coast of Africa, in the Azores, and they have 2 destroyers with them. And one of them is called the Pillsbury. Aircraft carriers were named after famous battles throughout American history. Destroyers were named after famous naval heroes. This one was Pillsbury. No relation to Pillsbury products. In any event, they discover with sonar there's a German submarine. The U-505 is in the distance. And submarines at that time in '44 were being destroyed at an incredible rate. All of the instructions for the submarines came from Karl Dernitz's headquarters outside of Berlin. All in code, the Enigma code. You must have heard of the Enigma. The unbreakable code that was broken by Bletchley Park and an American engineer. In any event, they discover the U-505, and the Pillsbury goes in and delivers depth charges. And sure enough, they crack the hull of the submarine. Submarine has to surface, and once they come up, they're being ripped apart by planes and deck guns from the destroyers, depth charges, everything. And one thing that they should have done, that they had orders to do, destroy the Enigma machine and the code books. And they did this by putting them into the torpedo tubes and just blasting them out into the unknown. The German crew jumps in the water, the boat is sinking, and it gets down to the deck level, and they're trying to man the guns and the machine gun and blood all over the place. And the commandant, the captain of the Guadalcanal, the carrier, sees that the U-505 is starting to settle in the water and sinking, and he does something remarkable. He orders volunteers to get into a longboat, motorized longboat, over the side and save that submarine, keep it from sinking. He had no idea that the code books were in there, and this affected D-Day invasion. If the German High Command had learned that the submarine had been captured and the Enigma machine and the code books had been captured it would have changed the whole complex of D-Day. The captain's name of the Guadalcanal, the Jeep carrier, his name was Gallery, and he orders crewmen aboard. They in danger of their own lives, they settle on the submarine, on the deck of the submarine, and the submarine is starting to slowly sink. The petcocks are open underneath in the submarine, and they're trying to destroy. The Germans try to destroy the submarine without letting the code books go. In any event, the crew goes aboard. They plug the holes, they stop the leaks, they start the pumps, and they actually capture the submarine. U-505. It was the only craft, the only naval craft in 125-year history since the War of 1812 that one American surface ship captured an enemy ship and took it in tow. What they did was they towed it from the Azores, which were sinking, back to the Bahamas. They throw canvas over it and they put an American flag on it. They bring it into the Bahamas, and the Captain Gallery from the Guadalcanal, he orders all the crew on deck, and he threatens them. He says, any man that tells that we've captured this submarine, I will personally put into naval prison for the rest of his life, if not shot. He threatened them with serious consequences if they ever disclose that the submarine had been captured. Submarine was on review in New York City and that was in the end about 1946. I had the privilege of going into that submarine. It was a mechanical marvel. It was pulled. It was set up on the dock, and it was also then brought into the city of Chicago, where it was put on place in the town square, and it was a point of curiosity, and people could look at what the German submarine looked like, the U-505. And eventually they built a whole museum around it in Chicago. You can go out to Chicago and see the U-505. It was a masterpiece of engineering. You get the feeling of going into a submarine, and this was, the German submarine force was so destroyed during the war that it was the highest rate of casualties. Men went to sea and they knew they were going to die. They would not come back. And they were welcomed as heroes up until the happy days, which was 1942. But after that, everything was downhill. And it's quite a story. I should mention one of the reasons that we won the Second World War was the American submarine force in the Pacific. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Some of the risks and the sacrifices that they took. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Charlie. Probably a different subject. Claudia Fox is going to speak to us right now. We got to oil that.
Oh my God. Yeah, anyway, hi, I'm Claudia. Just a little bit more. Okay. This is hysterical.
Sounds like my knee, so.
Okay, my biggest lesson. This is really my biggest lesson in life. I've taken this into many areas. Growing up, I was the least athletic child in the family. Being the eldest of 6, it was very evident that my sister Laura, who was 14 months younger, was a tomboy and was always outside playing sports with our brothers and the neighborhood boys. I sat inside and watched from the picture window with envy. My first attempt at an outside activity when I was about 6 or 7. I took a walk in the field across the street. When I got tired, I sat down on a nice little bump in the grass, which unfortunately turned out to be an anthill. You can just imagine how those bites hurt. That was the end of my outside activities for many years to come. Even in high school, I was embarrassed to be seen in those unflattered green jumpsuits. So I did as little as possible just to get by. It wasn't until I was 34 when I was encouraged to ski by my boyfriend David that I attempted a real sport. He would take me out on dates during the week but disappeared on the weekends. I was afraid to ask him where he was going. In those days, you didn't ask those questions. So it took months for me to find out where he went. He finally told me he was going to Vermont to ski. The last thing I wanted to do was to learn to ski. But he said, if you don't ski, we don't date. I really liked him, and that was big incentive to go. Before the first weekend, he helped me prepare. I needed a ski outfit. Of course, that was fun. The ski boots and the poles were rentable. Friday came, and we headed for Haystack Mountain, a little ski resort in Vermont. The drive was 4.5 hours, and after working all day and the horrible traffic getting there, I was exhausted. We rose, not by my choice, at 6 a.m. to don the ski gear and headed down to breakfast. There were 14 people in his ski lodge and 2 small boys who would later whiz by me on the slopes, making me feel like I should just pack it in. When we got to the ski lodge, I was sent to a beginner's class. No respectable skier was going to pair up with me for the day. I remember feeling so left out, but determined to learn as quickly as possible so that I could join them on the grown-up trails. There were a few weekends of sitting in the ski lodge, and then I determined I was ready to join the rest. I headed to the top of the ski lift. Upon arrival, I practically fell out of the lift chair, but managed to maintain some dignity. I found myself looking straight down a black trail, and everyone said, "Let's go," and headed down the slope. I jumped right in, and before I knew it, I was going so fast. I was in a panic. I saw someone in the way, but had no idea how to steer those skis. So I ran right over his skis. I fell and I got stuck in the thick snow, only to twist ligaments in my knee. The ski patrol came and carried me down the mountain on a sled where they fitted me in a cast. Now I had to sit in the lodge for a couple of weeks, and it was already spring. But once I felt strong enough, I went back out, this time finding slopes I actually belonged on. And I finished out the season. I must admit, most weekends felt like torture. I remember sitting down and crying, literally crying, in the mornings because I hated putting on all the layers of clothing. And it was so darn cold, I even got frostbite. I wondered, what on earth do they see in this sport? But eventually I got the hang of it, and I even had some fun. Next year, I started the year in good shape. And in February, the entire group took a ski vacation to Aspen. Honestly, I had the time of my life. I later was even asked to instruct beginners and was lucky enough to have many yearly ski vacations to places like Colorado, Utah, France, Switzerland, and Austria.
Wow.
Skiing opened up a whole new world to a young woman who grew up in sheltered Cleveland, Ohio. The biggest lesson for me, which I transferred to many other areas of my life, was you don't have to like what you're doing to reach a goal. If I had not been so determined and had given up at any point along the way, I would have missed out on some unbelievable adventures. Since then, I have done a lot of things in my life where the journey was not so great, but the outcome was unimaginable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You want to tell us what happened to David? Okay, we're running a little behind schedule here, but on the list we have a regular reporter, Debby Eisenman.
Good morning. How many of you have heard the expression, Big Brother is watching you? Okay. That appeared in the book 1984 by George Orwell. And it was a story of a fictitious, futuristic society. You may, after my presentation, if you haven't read it, I would recommend it. The future is now. We all laugh at this, but it may be closer than we think. The phone is ringing, you pick it up, and you say, I'd like to order a pizza. And, no, is this a George's Pizza? No, sir, it's Google Pizza. I must have dialed the wrong number. Sorry. No, sir, Google bought Gordon's Pizza last month. Okay, I would like to order a pizza. Do you want your usual, sir? My usual, you know me? According to our caller ID data sheet, the last 12 times you called, you ordered an extra large pizza with 3 cheeses, sausage, pepperoni, mushrooms, and meatballs on a thick crust. Okay, that's what I want. May I suggest that this time you order a pizza with ricotta, arugula, sun-dried tomatoes, and olives on a whole wheat, gluten-free thin crust. What? I hate vegetables. Your cholesterol is not good, sir. How the hell do you know? Well, we cross-referenced your home phone number with your medical records. We have the result of your blood test for the last 7 years. Okay, but I do not want your rotten vegetable pizza. I already take medication for my cholesterol. Excuse me, sir, but you have not taken your medication on a regular basis. According to our database, you only purchased a box of 30 cholesterol tablets once at Drug RX Network 4 months ago. I bought more from another drugstore. That doesn't show on your credit card statement. I paid in cash, but you did not withdraw enough cash according to your bank statement. I have other sources of cash. That doesn't show on your last tax return. Unless you bought them using an undeclared income source, which is against the law. What the hell? I'm sorry, sir. We use such information only with the sole intention of helping you. Enough already. I'm sick to death of a Google. Sorry about that. That's okay. Where did it go? Oh, here. I'm sick to death of Google, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, and all the others. I'm going to an island without internet, cable TV, where there is no cell phone service and no one to watch me or spy on me. I understand, sir, but you need to renew your passport. It expired 6 weeks ago.
Next on the list, Connie Adamski.
Oh, no, I don't know the list, I didn't check it.
You didn't? Oh, no, okay. You're right.
Right.
Then we'll go to Clem Natale. The check for Claudia went up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I was looking for an article that shared my sentiments on fireflies or lightning bugs. We used to really enjoy a family tradition. My parents, me, my children, and my grandchildren we were hoping would share in the joy of getting these lightning bugs. I found an article that shared my sentiments, and I'm going to use this as the town of Southbury. In Southbury, a small town nestled amidst rolling hills and lush green fields, the townsfolk often reminisced about the good old days when summer evenings were filled with an enchanting sight, the dance of countless lightning bugs illuminating the night sky. In those days, children eagerly awaited the arrival of summer, not just for the warmth and sunshine, but for the mesmerizing spectacle that awaited them after dusk. As the sun began its descent below the horizon, the air would become infused with a sweet, earthy fragrance, and a soft, golden glow would bathe the landscape. Children armed with glass jars and sheer excitement would venture out into the fields and meadows, ready to catch lightning bugs. They would tiptoe through the dew-kissed grass, their eyes scanning the darkness for the faint flickers of light. Laughter and giggles would fill the air as friends competed to catch the most magical creatures of the night. Each lightning bug was like a tiny beacon of wonder, radiating its own unique glow. Their tiny lanterns would blink on and off, creating a symphony of lights that seemed to dance to the rhythm of the children's hearts. The night would come alive with the ethereal beauty of these tiny creatures, as if the stars themselves had descended to frolic in the meadows. The children would carefully coax the lightning bugs into their glass jars, admiring their delicate wings and the warm glow they emitted. The jars would transform into their very own lanterns, casting a soft golden light that illuminated their smiling faces. They would hold their jars close, feeling the gentle vibrations of the insects' wings against their hands, connecting with the magical energy they carried. As the children returned home, the village would transform into a haven of enchantment. Porches and windowsills would twinkle with countless jars, turning the town into a wonderland. Families would gather in their backyards, sharing stories and laughter while surrounded by the gentle glow of the captured lightning bugs. The flickering lights seemed to weave a tapestry of dreams and nostalgia, transporting everyone back to simpler times. Parents, too, would join in the magic, their hearts filled with fond memories of their own childhoods. They would recount stories of grand adventures, of chasing lightning bugs with friends until the late hours of the night, the rhythmic sounds of crickets and the whispers of the wind as their only companions. But as the years went by, the town began to change. Urbanization encroached upon the fields and meadows, leaving little room for the lightning bugs to thrive. The magical dance of their light slowly faded, and the children felt a deep sadness in their hearts.
Thank you, Clem. And we have one more we'll squeeze in before Will comes in and starts moving things around. Pam Cleary.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be tall. Well, you know I brought a few poems, but I left my husband to golf today. When I was a kid, I had an uncle who I never met. I don't know if anybody here was living in Glastonbury at any time or familiar with the town of Glastonbury. The only thing I knew about him was that the American Legion in Glastonbury at the time was named after him and another soldier from World War II. It was called the Faust Smith Post. And that was the name of the first and the last person who died in World War II from the town of Glastonbury. And I didn't know any more about the story. I found out many years later. And when I found out what happened, I had to write this poem for him. Being that it was Memorial Day this weekend, I thought I'd share it with you. It's called The Last Casualty. He's buried in Lorraine, France. Imagine, if you will, his mother's pain upon learning her young soldier son, shot by a sniper, unaware, peace had already been declared. He was 19. Then I have a poem because Father's Day's coming up, and my dad was a practical joker. When I was a kid, coming home from high school one day, carrying my instrument and all my books, I hopped on the local town bus, had enough money to get me to the library where I picked up more books. And then when I went out to catch the bus to go home, I found out I only had 2 dimes in my pocket. So I called my father, the practical joker, to give me a ride home, and I thought I got the wrong number. This is what I ended up writing about. It's called Joe's Bar and Grill. Had I heard the familiar "your dime" speak, I might have recognized his voice, stayed on the line, beseeched a ride home from the library. But this foreign phrase persuaded me I must have misdialed or been badly connected. So I stammered an apology, hung up the phone, embarrassed, dialed a neighbor with my last dime to deliver the message. His truck pulled up a short time later. He was silent as I scrambled in, but mischief snickered in his eyes and a smile lingered on his lips. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I also brought a couple poems about some old friends. This one is going to connect with you, I think. I called it Temporal Dyslexia, and it was about a friend that I was very close to in high school. And then as time goes by, you kind of drift your different ways, you go to different schools, you lose touch entirely. Many years later, probably Facebook allowed us to reconnect, and I had not seen her in years. We're at opposite ends of the state, and we agreed we're going to meet in the middle, we're going to see each other, we're going to spend some time together. So we go to do exactly that. We end up in an auditorium much like this at some event. Picture even bigger, Sarah Cook Hall, one entrance way at the front, the place is full, and I'm sitting way in the back, waiting to see my friend show up. So this is what happened to me, and I called it temporal dyslexia. Sentinel at the door, patiently awaiting my friend's arrival, I scan each smile entering the room. But when she appears, I miss completely her face, am caught off guard by a stranger's warm greeting. I did not recognize this mature woman with silver-streaked hair, laugh lines, and glasses. Though our friendship is decades old, in my mind's eye, she's still 15. And then the last one, I guess. A friend of mine introduced me to mockingbirds many, many years ago. Told me some interesting stories about them. And she's passed away, probably in 2004, I think. In 2009, I was hiking at one of the local places, and you park your car parallel to or perpendicular to the road, and everyone comes up and hits their remote control and beep beep. And I hit my remote control one day and I go beep beep, and I hear beep beep. And I'm like, what the heck was that? Well, of course, it was a mockingbird. And it reminded me of her, and I ended up writing this poem for her. It's called Mockingbirds. He sounded just like the telephone. I'm sorry, I'm going to back up a second. They had a barn. They had a great big yard and a barn and a horse and a cantankerous donkey, and they had a phone out in the barn because when they were mucking around, they didn't want to have to go into the house and muck up the house. So they used to keep a telephone in the barn. I just want you to know that. Mockingbirds. He sounded just like the telephone in the barn, she said, and told me how they'd come running to answer the phone, only to find it wasn't ringing. Took them days to discover it was a mockingbird. She told a tale about how they were said to mimic the lonely cry of other birds to help them attract mates. Mockingbird matchmakers. Was it true? She didn't know. Still, it makes a great story. She's been gone a few years now, but we still keep in touch. Every once in a while, I get a call from a mockingbird.
That's really cute.
Okay, thank you all for coming. We had some very interesting stories, and it's good to have some new people here. The next meeting is July 7th, Friday, July 7th, and so...
Wait a minute. Sorry. Sorry, don't blow yet. Very quickly, if anyone is interested in sailing, and you know we've told some sailing stories here, we have developed a new group called Ahoy Sailor. It meets in the big room at the lodge Sunday evenings 7 to 8:30. Anybody can come with an interest in sailing or just wants to sit and listen, and it's totally free and it's totally no obligation on anybody's part, but Bob and I will both be there. Okay, honey.